Hello everyone and welcome back to Laurence Plays Factorio Space Exploration and Crest Audio 2 for part 3 of this week's streams? I don't know. This session's update video is anyway, in which we should be looking into why Mike has been making miniature processing facilities over here and what these are all about. We've talked in the past about the mining system out here on Androgun and how Mike has decided it would be fun to try and mine up the entire planet, and I think that's an entertaining goal. So we'll leave him to it and see how he gets on with it. And so in order to get this working, he's got the mines around here all bringing in the various ores. The stone is what we really want from this planet, but there's quite a lot of other stuff available here as well. And so he's got the mines bringing in. Well, there's a stone mine, there's a copper mine, there's a Vita mine, and all those are being passed into this warehouse. I should probably also mention, because I haven't mentioned it before, that there's a system up here where we are always passing stone through from this warehouse to this warehouse. And this system is set up so that it waits until the train is 60% full of stone and then passes other stuff through from this warehouse into this one to pack into the train. So we get a bit of a variety and some interest going into it. So it's mostly going to be stone because that's what we want. Oh, and the byproducts from the core processing over here because we need to get rid of those. And then after that, the other 40% will be filled both from the core processing and also from the miscellaneous stuff that's coming in from here. Now, I didn't realise this last time I looked, and I queried why Mike didn't have the stone belt coming around the top and going into this warehouse. Well, he sort of has, because whilst it does go into this one, it's then being passed out this way and passing straight through, even when the other one isn't running because the train hasn't got above its 60% stone. So we will always have lots and lots of stone pouring in, and so this is going to be seriously increasing the proportion of the stuff that's going through that is stone, because we've got a belt going in here steadily that is just pure stone, and then this other belt of miscellaneous over here. So we're always going to have plenty of stuff going into the trains, and there should be an interesting variety going eventually. Although I do notice that because of the way things seem to have sort of just fallen out at the moment, the stone is constantly being flowing in here and flowing through here, so we're getting a lot more stone than we are anything else. And when both belts do start to flow, we just get stone going through. So at the moment, we're not getting any of the more interesting stuff coming through, but we are getting through a lot of stone. So whilst this is useful for what we're actually trying to do, which is get lots and lots of stone from Androgun, which is why we came out here, it's a stone primary, it's not so useful for the actually emptying the planet of all the miscellaneous stuff that's on it, because quite a lot of it is just being, well, it's not being ignored, quite a lot of it is just not being taken away and taken off to the other planets. This is all brought over by spaceship and then down by train onto Norvis over here, so we've got the stone all being brought down specifically here where it goes into a stone station, so a stone train can take the stone away to stone drops. Very stony. And we've also got the iron one that's coming over from the other planet, the one I forget the name of off the top of my head, and then we have the other trains that are coming from Androgun, which are bringing in lots and lots of miscellaneous. So you can see we've got all these different things that could potentially be brought over by the train because there is some of all of these things on that planet. And they're all going to then get dropped over here and taken away somewhere appropriate. And that's where the new construction comes in. So you can see here we've got the various sorting going on here for the normal, the mundane resources. So the copper is brought over to here, the iron up to here. So those are dealt with locally. They'll fill up stations, and those can be taken away to the big smelting areas because we have big facilities on this planet for dealing with these products. And the same for coal and uranium. But then these three exotic materials, the imersite, the cryonite, and the Vita melange, are then being taken away on these separate belts, come all the way over here, and then run up along this way and over to here, where we have other areas that are now capable of dealing with them. And the idea is that rather than trying to ship them off to the appropriate planets where those things come from, and we could do that, we could put all the imersite in a spaceship and take it off to Taras, we could put all the Vita melange into a spaceship and take it off to Bigrid, but that way lies madness, excessive complexity, and just general craziness. And so Mike has decided it would be a better idea to build up miniature processing facilities for each of those things over here on Norvis. And so this is, in fact, a miniature processing facility for the imersite. So you can bring the imersite in, it gets crushed, it gets dissolved, and then we've got some and it produces some sand, which can then be turned into, what are you, quartz, aren't you? Yeah, quartz, to be turned into silicon to then allow us to make the crystals up here. Or we can bring in some rare metal to make it into, and the powder to make it into plates. And so we've got an output of imersite crystals and plates, and also the sulfur that's produced as a byproduct from those as well. And so we've got about 2,000 of the sort of the useful outputs, and we've got about 1,000 sulfur over here, and these are all going into stations, and so these are presumably going to be intended to be relatively high priority ones, with the hope that trains will come over here, grab these, and take them away when we start to need them. I don't know if any actual prioritization has been done, and because this area is it's kind of out on a limb over here, but I don't know. Maybe it'll be fine. I'm not sure. I don't really know where the immer sight is coming from for the bus, so maybe this will work really nicely. I'm not sure. I guess we'll wait and see how the prioritization is set up there. He's also set up a miniature cryonite processing facility up here, so it's the same sort of thing. The cryonite ore comes up here, crushed into the powder, and then whatevered into crystals, and then turned into the rods. So yeah, looks nice and simple. And these can all be quite small and compact like this, because we're not really worried about throughput. Mike has put a beacon in here to make sure the whole thing does run nice and quickly, but there's no need to have more machines, more than a couple of machines doing anything, because as I say, we're not expecting to get enormous amounts through, and this isn't so much intended to keep the factory satisfied as it is just to use up the output that we don't really need. And so it's a sink rather than the main processing area. Speaking of sinks, he does also have a machine here that will turn the sand, any excess sand, into landfill and then put it in the box over here, so it can be then forgotten about and ignored. But that's, I believe that and the sulfur are pretty much the only overflows, the byproducts from this system. I have a little bit of concern over whether everything is going to get properly used from here, partly because I don't know. I suspect the quantities produced over here will be small enough that we can probably just make them disappear, and the fact that Mike has used all of these green belts to make all of this stuff means he's probably used up more immersium plate than he's ever going to generate from this. But you know, that should be somewhere where this sort of thing can go, because we are always going to need more and more and more belts, and we always seem to have a need for sulfur. There's a lot of voracious appetite for that particularly for the Naquium processing, and to some extent for the vulcanite processing, and so this can always be shipped up to Norbit and then go off in spaceships to wherever it's needed. Meanwhile, I've been messing around on Talos, just for a change, and I think I've got things playing fairly nicely over here. So there were a few issues that you may or may not remember. One of which was that we had the system over here which had clogged up, or the trains were all completely full and nothing was going through. And it turned out that was because I was asking for a load of yellow squares to be sent out here in the spaceship, and the system at the other end couldn't find any. I fixed the wiring here now, basically by putting in this breakpoint we're using a decider combinator here in order to prevent the yellow squares from being passed up here over to the transmitter, and that has worked nicely. The spaceship has started flying again. It's coming over to take away all of the junk that's being produced from over here, and also the little bits of beryllium that are being produced as a bit of a byproduct as well. I also ran into a problem where after having fixed that, I then noticed that the core mining down here, the core chunks had clogged up completely, and that was because this was a slightly weird one. This was because we got too much crude oil coming out of the core processing here, because we weren't making enough sulfur to get through it all, and the sulfur is used to make the sulfuric acid for all the beryllium processing up here, and we've been bringing in massive quantities of this because we've always needed it. We've been getting through huge amounts of sulfuric acid for all the beryllium processing, but now we've stopped processing it in quite the same rate. It turns out that the rate the oil comes out of these core chunks is more than you need in order to make the sulfuric acid to process that amount of beryllium. And so, in order to sort that out, I've come down here. I've put in a system that's this one is somewhere. No, yes, here we go. We're pulling the steel out of this furnace here, where it was being made for various things, including the low density structures back when we were using delivery cannon capsules, and then coming over here to be made into air filters, which we've removed probably because we needed the machines somewhere else. And so those come over here, and that's being taken. Then we're pulling in the steel here to make the barrels, and then putting the barrels into this machine to take the oil away. With the standard, only run when there's more than 20,000 in here. So we always can make sure we never quite fill up, but we always have plenty of oil available to make into the sulfur. And as you can see, we've got quite a few barrels coming along here. There's a couple there. There's probably a couple more over here somewhere. Yeah, there's another couple there. So we are churning through the barrels. We are gradually getting rid of bits of oil because, as I said, we're producing it faster than we're using it. And shipping all of this back to Norvis is absolutely acceptable. We have voracious appetites for oil back over there, mostly for making sulfur, ironically, and so that works quite nicely. I have noticed that I've screwed up the undergrounds here, and we've got iron ore on the bottom of this belt here because there's someone left a splitter here, and Factorio isn't smart enough to leave an extra gap when you just drag across, and I'm not smart enough to keep an eye on it and make sure it doesn't do stupid things like that. However, it isn't actually causing a problem. We've just got a load of extra iron ore sat on a belt over here, so I think I'll probably just ignore it and pretend it never happened. And so now that all of that, all the junk is running happily into the spaceship over here, that means that everything, all the systems up here that are doing the basic beryllium stuff from the core processing can run again perfectly happily. So as you can see, we've got the steady stream of beryllium coming in here, or beryl, I suppose it's called when it's in the ore phase, trundling along here, coming down here into these machines, and then we're grabbing up as much as we need in order to keep the Naquium processing going, and this pipe up here seems to be pretty full, so that's going nicely. And then the rest of it is just going into these machines in order to be cooked into actual beryllium ingots, because I feel like we might as well. It's something to do with it. And then that can flow down here and go into the machine and go into the system down here. Now I am starting to think that maybe I should put some sort of limiter on this. Now, as I was saying before, we've got a limit at the moment already set on the on what's being made from the machines that are running off the normal mines. But the core miners, with them being infinite but produced over time, I want to keep them running steadily as much as possible, just because it's free resources that way. And so that's why this machine is just steadily running constantly. But I do worry a little bit that the extra core chunks we're then producing and all the junk that comes from that, and the little dribble of beryllium that's coming through from here, is eventually going to cause the system at the other end to catch up. So I'm a little bit concerned we might be producing the beryllium faster than we're using it. But if I look back over the last hour, we produced 4,000 and we used 4.4 thousand, so that seems to be okay. We are using it faster than we're producing it, and for once that is actually a good thing, because we have huge amounts more production capacity that we can turn on if we need it, but we need to sink as much of it as we can. So, and looking back further, well, we've had some higher spikes along here, but over this time period, produced 51 and used 147 per minute. So yes, we do seem to be using the beryllium faster than we're generating it. So that is a good thing. It means the whole system shouldn't clog up. Emphasis on the shouldn't there, of course. And over on the other side, in the Naquium processing, well, things have got a little bit interesting over here, and I'm not quite sure whether it's a good thing or not. No, I'm pretty sure it's a bad thing. So the system is running quite happily. We've got all of the inputs coming in and processing, and we've got plenty of crushed naquitites coming in as well. So this is all good. The thing is, though, if you notice up here, we've stopped the production of, or the pass-through of crystal production going into the warehouse here, because we have enough of that in Norbit, which means we have 5,000 in Norbit, and so I've gone, okay, that's kind of enough. I suppose we'll stop making it, but I still feel a little bit uncomfortable about that. We're still producing the ingots, because we haven't got quite so many of those. Because this is, as we've seen before, this is a double transport system. So we've got from here, we're sending the Naquium crystals and the Naquium ingots up to here to go into the spaceship, and then off over here to Norbit, where the spaceship will land here and unload. And so I don't want to have enormous quantities of crystal coming over and jamming up the system so the ingots can't come out, or vice versa. So I'm watching the amount of ingots in here and the amount of crystals in here. And so this one, as you can see, this one's at 6.3 thousand, which is more than 5,000. Means the warehouse is mostly full. It's about 2/3 full. And over here we've only got 4.4 thousand, and that means actually the warehouse is nearly full because this doesn't stack as high. So I think we probably do need a second warehouse for the Naquium ingots over here. But exactly what we're going to do about numbers to transport, I don't know, because my worry is that this isn't going to work nicely, and it's going to break somehow. And whether that's going to be breaking due to having too many crystals, too many ingots, not enough crystals, not enough, I don't know. But I think it feels fragile, and I'm not sure what to do with it. I suspect the correct fix with this might be to do a count them in, count them out system like Marc has done with all the Vita stuff, and that does work until it gets out of sync. It's fiddlier and slightly more awkward, but it does work, and I could just sort of steal most of his design and then adapt it for my purposes. But I don't know. It's a tricky one, because we do want to have we always want to have a decent amount of each of these available. But we also don't want to have too much of them available, and it's tricky to get that balance. And I'm not quite sure what the best way to do it is, especially as the spaceship has quite a large inventory. Now, I think this is probably going to be okay. The worst case is that a ship turns up with 3 warehouses of, say, ingots, or one of the two things, and then that's enough to gum up all of the systems around here, because we've only got one warehouse at the top here to store it. So I think let's leave it until it becomes a problem, and then if it does become a problem, then I can try and fix it and come up with something better, or just cry myself to sleep. We shall see. Having looked at the system though, the train is now working quite nicely. So we've got the system down here where we bring stuff in along here. It gradually fills up the warehouse, which is fine. And up at the top, the train will come along here, and then it will always wait for 5 minutes up here. That's 300 seconds of inactivity going on here. Basically, so waiting until it's unloaded everything, and then it'll just sit there for a while because there's probably no point in going straight back down again because there probably isn't very much. There certainly isn't a train worth to pick up yet. When it goes back down to the bottom, it will wait there until it has 5 seconds of inactivity, so nothing's happening to it quite then, and also until it gets a signal of S. So let's go and have a quick look at what that means. So down here, we are watching a signal being brought down from space and seeing what numbers on there, and then subtracting the amount of stuff that's already down here because it's mixed into the signal that's coming from space for legacy reasons, should we say. Those are added together, and so if there is then stuff up in space, the train will be dispatched to go and get it because that means there is stuff up there that we need as long as there's been some inactivity. And also, if there's anything in this warehouse and there's been some inactivity, that means the train is full, and so it's time for it to go up and unload at the top. So that means the train will leave either when it's not doing anything and there is stuff to go and get from the top, so it might as well go and grab some of it, and that prevents the silly situation where you've run out of one of the ingredients over here, and so the train can't fill up, and so you need to but there is stuff available in orbit, so you need to make sure the train can depart at that point. And it'll also depart if it's full, because then it needs to take all that stuff up in order to come back down again with some more space available to pick up more supplies. And this seems to be working very nicely. I'm quite happy with that. It does have a rather long wait up at the top, and I think that's probably not actually required anymore because we've got a system down here that makes it wait for a sensible amount of time. So I think I'll get rid of that 5-minute wait and just have it always waiting down here rather than waiting at the top. I think that'll make it slightly neater, and it'll mean it'll be waiting somewhere where stuff is actually happening. That said, I don't think it actually matters because in 5 minutes you probably don't get an entire warehouse trains full worth of stuff in here. Although that said, in the however long it's been so far, we've got nearly a train worth there. So actually, I think the train probably should be coming down fairly soon. And if we look up here, we'll see that it's still got at least 2.5 minutes left. So yeah, this should not be there. That should be a 10 seconds or 30 seconds of inactivity or something like that. So let's change that. The train will immediately depart because it's already been idle for more than 30 seconds. And then when it gets back down onto the ground on Talos, it'll pull in over here, it'll load up on the Naquium, and then it'll just wait there because there isn't anything to pick up in orbit and the warehouse, and it's not full. So this should work quite nicely, I think. And here it is. As part of making these improvements, one of the things I did end up needing to do, which is a little bit silly, was I needed to put in these combinators over here, but there weren't any on the planet. So I decided it'd be sensible to just straight up make some because I could. And so I put in these machines over here, and these are just on the junk belt where it's pouring all the rubbish out from the core processing and just letting it go down here to go into the warehouse, to go into the trains, to go into the spaceship, to go over to Norvis for processing. And so it's relatively straightforward just to pull the copper ore out here because there's some of it flowing along there, make it into copper plates to make into cables, and then pull out the stone to make into stone bricks, to make into stone tablets, and then with that and the cable I can make the circuits, and with the circuits and some more cable I can make the combinators. And that was actually fairly straightforward, and it amused me a little bit having to do this from sort of, I'd say first principles, but we've got advanced enough tech now that putting this together and just from this steady stream of trash that's coming past was quite easy and just worked quite nicely, so I'm quite pleased with that. Over on Bigrid, Marc has increased some of the requests because we're getting through things a bit too quickly, particularly the Vitalic reagent, I think. So no doubt this is now... no, that's the wrong thing. So over here, no doubt there is now... Yeah, and we're now asking for 30,000 at a time. And that meant he had to put in some additional storage space over here because there was a risk. If you order all of that stuff and it all arrives at once, there is a risk of it overflowing the warehouses up here a little bit. And we don't want that to happen. And so now we've got these extra containers along here to store some of that stuff that's coming through. There's a lot of loaders here. I don't want to know what that's doing to our UPS, but it is at least going to give us that extra buffer we need, because every so often some lunatic comes in from Talos and says, "Hello, could I have a bajillion Vitalic reagent, please?" And it goes, "Oh, fine, here you go," and then we run out for absolutely everywhere else. So yeah, it's good to have a bit more in supply, in stock over here, and you can sort of tell by by which belts are going back all the way down into here, which things we've required quite a bit more of as well. We also have far more of these core chunks than we know what to do with, but these are only required for making one of the biological sciences, so we're not getting through them particularly quickly, and we have rather a lot down here that we just need to sort of gradually dribble through. We'll probably use them all up eventually, but it's not going to exactly be soon. Marc says he switched all of the machines over here that are producing the bits and pieces for everyone's armour over to using blue chests instead of green chests because there were some problems there. I'm not 100% sure what the problems were. Maybe they weren't pulling... Oh, yes, I am. It's because a lot of the stuff that we need is stored in green chests down here, and so the bots won't transfer from green to green because they're both buffers, but they will transfer from green to blue. So that should make all of this work nicely and allow us to produce all these suit weapons and armor things, and in fact the better suits as well. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And down in the recycling area, we had managed to overload on heavy oil because when you crush the scrap or reprocess the scrap, one of the things it produces is a small amount of heavy oil, and so you need to use that up somewhere. Otherwise, you'll start to have problems. And for quite a long time, we were sinking a lot of that into thermofluid production. And so, however, we've now got to the point where we have 400,000 thermofluid plus another 160,000 in the train, so there's a lot of that around. We don't need any more right now, and so we're filling up all the tanks and things, and it was causing problems. So over here we are supposed to be cracking the heavy oil down into light oil and then into petroleum gas that, in theory at least, we use in significantly larger quantities. However, there wasn't enough water being brought up from Norvis, because one of the things you need is to drop off water here in order to use that for the cracking. And so Tristan's fixed that in a fairly simple way. I believe he's just put in an additional water carrier train, which will presumably come along and park here at some point. I wonder if there's an extra station. There isn't. Yeah, they're all called fluid buffer, so there is in fact an extra station. And now, as you can see, the water train has just departed because somewhere is using water. And so yes, we're getting through quite a lot of water apparently. And see, there's another one come up to replace it. And one train wasn't sufficient to maintain the supply of the water for everything that required it. So sticking in a second one, nice and simple, it's solved the problem. And there's some more petroleum gas coming up to demonstrate that we are getting through the petroleum gas, even though we're generating quite a lot of it from heavy oil. And so, since we haven't had any deaths this week, well done everyone there, we'll move on to the research. And the first thing we've researched is Jetpack 4, and this is one of the Deep Space Sciences, so we had to use Deep Space Science Pack 1 for that. Fortunately, I've been creating a few of the catalogues for that, so that's working quite nicely. And it's an upgrade over the Jetpacks 1, 2 and 3. It makes you go faster. It produces 4 thrust instead of 3, 2 or 1 thrust from the earlier tier jetpacks, which makes a certain amount of sense. And this is one of those things where often you wouldn't normally bother to upgrade it because, look, it's quite expensive. It's an expanding recipe, so it takes 2 jetpack 3s to make a jetpack 4 and a load of modules and some Naquium cubes. So if this was a normal machine, like an assembly machine of some sort, we probably wouldn't bother to do this upgrade because it's quite expensive and doesn't really, and there's no point. It just makes you might as well just use more of the previous tier of machines. However, when you're loading up your suit, you've only got a limited amount of space in the equipment grid there, and so because of that, having higher tier jetpacks that provide more thrust for the same size suddenly becomes very, very useful. So these sort of things are worth having. We have researched matter science too, and not only have we researched it, we are practically making it now. So this is the way we normally do things. We'll do the catalogue, we'll research the catalogue relatively early on, because then whoever's trying to make that particular type of science can just go off and work on it whenever they want. And they can see all the recipes, they can program the machines and so on. And then when you get to the last stage of it, then it's time to research the actual science pack itself, because once you've got the science pack researched, you can make those machines and then you can actually start to make the science packs. But once you've done that, all of the extra researches you can do with that particular science pack then suddenly appear in the to-do list in the yellow section up here. And so if you haven't actually started making that science pack yet, you don't really want that to happen. And that's why we do the pack right at the last minute, the last possible moment. But we've got to that last possible moment because we are ready to start making them. And we are currently working on Constitution 5, which gives you a buff to character health. So it makes you a little bit healthier, a little bit harder to kill. Lovely. It's not that useful because most of the time we're mostly staying out of trouble, and 50 health points isn't that much anyway when you're dealing with particularly large biters. You need to take everything on your shields and armour. The health isn't going to make an enormous difference. However, apparently we needed to use up some biological research packs, and so this seemed like a good way to do it. I'm not quite sure why a bit of bioscience needed to be used up. Maybe it was in a buffer somewhere in an awkward place, or we needed to pull some stuff through from a machine somewhere. I don't know, but for whatever reason, this is now, well, it's in progress. It does use deep space science, and that's probably the limiting factor on this. Yes, we don't currently have any deep space science packs coming in, which is why this is paused at 33%. But we'll get that fixed fairly quickly next time, I'm sure, and then we can start churning through the biologicals again. And that brings us to the end of the video. So I hope you've enjoyed that and it's been interesting, and you'll come back next time. So as you've probably noticed, there haven't been any streams this week because I've been otherwise engaged. However, I've managed to keep the videos going reasonably well, I think. And don't forget that next week the schedule will be changing around a bit. So the Factorio K2SE streams will be happening on Monday. The Satisfactory stream will be happening on Wednesday, and the update videos will come out over the weekend. And I'll probably tuck the sort of the miscellaneous videos in on the Thursday. So everything's shifting around a bit, but there will still be all the content you're used to, lots of stuff on here to watch. So please make sure you're subscribed, come along to the streams, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.